Years later, Ethan Carter's name was spoken with reverence. He wasn't just remembered as the man who built Asterisk, the Dawnbreaker Asterisk. He was celebrated as a pioneer who had helped humanity take its first bold steps into the cosmos. The ship itself became a legend, preserved in a grand museum where people from all over the galaxy came to see it. Its rough, patched-together frame told a story of resilience and ingenuity, a reminder that greatness often came from struggle. Ethan, now older but still full of energy, spent his days mentoring young engineers and scientists. He traveled to schools, labs, and spaceports, sharing his experiences and encouraging others to dream big. "You don't need perfect tools or endless resources," he would tell them. "All you need is an idea and the courage to keep going, even when things get hard." Claire remained by his side, their partnership as strong as ever. Together, they founded a program to support aspiring inventors, providing them with the tools and guidance they needed to turn their ideas into reality. They called it the Dawn Initiative, a nod to the ship that had started it all. It quickly grew into a global movement, inspiring countless individuals to pursue careers in science and engineering. The collaboration between humans and the Valens continued to flourish. What had begun as a tense rivalry had evolved into a deep and lasting friendship. Earth benefited from the aliens' advanced technology, while the Valens gained a newfound appreciation for humanity's creativity and determination. Joint missions explored distant star systems, uncovering secrets about the universe that neither species could have discovered alone. One day, Ethan stood on a platform overlooking a bustling spaceport, watching as sleek ships prepared for launch. These vessels were far more advanced than Asterisk, the Dawnbreaker Asterisk, capable of traveling faster and farther than anyone had once thought possible. Yet every design carried echoes of the scrappy ship that had changed everything. A young girl approached him, her eyes wide with wonder. "Mr. Carter," she said shyly, clutching a sketchpad filled with drawings of spaceships. "Do you think I could build something like Asterisk, the Dawnbreaker Asterisk, one day?" Ethan knelt down to meet her gaze, smiling warmly. "Of course you can," he replied. "And maybe you'll build something even better. The sky isn't the limit, it's just the beginning." The girl beamed, running off to show her sketches to Claire, who was nearby talking to a group of students. Watching her go, Ethan felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This was what mattered most. Not fame or recognition, but knowing that he had inspired others to reach for the stars. As the years passed, Ethan reflected on how much had changed since those early days in the warehouse. Humanity was no longer confined to Earth. It was part of a vast, interconnected community exploring the universe together. And while there were still challenges ahead, Ethan knew they would face them with the same spirit that had brought them this far. On a quiet evening, long after retiring from active work, Ethan returned to the museum where Asterisk, the Dawnbreaker Asterisk, was displayed. The ship sat under soft lighting, its surface scared but proud. He walked around it slowly, running his hand along its frame. Memories flooded back, the late nights, the failures, the moments of triumph. "You did good," he whispered to the ship, as if it could hear him. "We both did." Behind him, Claire joined him, leaning on his shoulder. "It's not just the ship people remember," she said softly. "It's what it stood for: hope, determination, and the belief that we can do anything if we try." Ethan nodded, feeling a lump in his throat. "Yeah," he said, "that's what matters most." Together, they stood in silence, gazing at the ship that had changed their lives. And the course of history, for Ethan, it wasn't about the destination. It was about the journey. Every challenge, every setback, and every victory had led to this moment, a future where humanity looked up at the stars not with fear or doubt, but with hope and confidence. As they left the museum, hand in hand, Ethan glanced up at the night sky. The stars seemed brighter now, closer somehow, and though he knew he wouldn't live to see all the wonders humanity would discover, he felt at peace. The universe was vast, and the adventure was just beginning. Months after the trials, Ethan and Claire continued to work on new projects, their minds buzzing with ideas inspired by what they had learned from the Valens. The collaboration between humans and aliens had opened doors no one had imagined possible. Scientists from both sides shared knowledge, combining Earth's creativity with the Valens' advanced technology. It was a partnership that promised to change the future of space exploration forever. Ethan spent his days in meetings, workshops, and labs, helping to design new ships and tools for interstellar travel. He still loved tinkering with machines, but now he had access to resources and materials he could only have dreamed of before. Claire worked alongside him, her sharp mind solving problems that once seemed unsolvable. Together, they became part of a team pushing humanity toward the stars. Despite all the progress, Ethan never forgot where it had started. The old warehouse, the late nights, and the countless failures that had led to Asterisk, the Dawnbreaker Asterisk. That ship remained a symbol of hope, not just for its technological achievements, but for the spirit behind it. It reminded everyone that greatness often came from humble beginnings. One day, Cale visited Ethan at the lab where he was working. The Valen ambassador had become more approachable over time, his earlier arrogance replaced by genuine curiosity about humanity. "Your species continues to surprise me," Cale said as they walked among rows of half-finished prototypes. "You adapt so quickly, even when faced with challenges beyond your understanding." Ethan smiled. "That's what we do best. We may not always have the answers, but we're good at finding them, or making them up as we go along." Cale chuckled, a sound that still felt strange coming from an alien. "It is a trait I am beginning to admire. Tell me, Ethan, what drives you? Why do you push so hard?" Ethan thought for a moment before answering. "I guess it's because I believe in possibilities. There's always another way, another solution. And if we stop trying, we'll never know what we're capable of." Cale nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "Perhaps that is why your species has such potential. You refuse to accept limits, even those placed upon you by others." The conversation stayed with Ethan long after Cale left. He realized how much had changed since their first meeting. Back then, the Valens had dismissed humanity as weak and primitive. Now they were working together, learning from each other. It wasn't perfect. There were still misunderstandings and differences, but it was a start. As the years passed, Ethan and Claire's work laid the foundation for a golden age of exploration. New ships, faster and more efficient than Asterisk, the Dawnbreaker Asterisk, carried humans deeper into space than ever before. Colonies sprang up on distant planets, and trade routes connected Earth with alien worlds. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe. It was part of something bigger. But amid all the excitement, Ethan stayed grounded. He returned often to his hometown, visiting the old warehouse where it had all begun. Sometimes he brought young engineers with him, showing them the place where Asterisk, the Dawnbreaker Asterisk, had been built. "This is where it started," he would say, pointing to the dusty corners and worn tools. Not with fancy equipment or endless resources, but with determination and a lot of hard work. Those visits reminded him of how far they had come and how much further they could go. The universe was vast, full of wonders waiting to be discovered. And while the journey wouldn't always be easy, Ethan knew humanity was ready for it. Claire joined him on one of these trips, standing quietly beside him as they looked around the empty workshop. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "The early days, I mean." Ethan shook his head. "Not really. Those days were tough, but they got us here. And honestly, I think the best is yet to come." They left the warehouse together, stepping out into the bright sunlight. As they drove away, Ethan glanced back one last time. Then he turned his attention to the road ahead, knowing that every step forward was a chance to keep reaching for the stars. The victory in the Nebula trial marked a turning point. For the first time, the Valens looked at Ethan and Asterisk, the Dawnbreaker Asterisk, not with mockery, but with respect. Cale, the alien ambassador, stood before a large crowd gathered to witness the final results of the competition. His sharp features were calm, but there was a new weight to his words. "We came here believing your species was primitive," he said, his voice carrying across the assembly. "But you have proven us wrong." Ethan listened quietly, standing beside Claire as the crowd erupted into applause. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, and people cheered wildly. It was overwhelming, but Ethan didn't let it go to his head. He knew this moment wasn't just about him. It was about showing the universe that humanity could rise to any challenge. Kel continued, his tone softer now. "Your ship may lack our technology, but it has something far rarer: ingenuity. You adapted to conditions we thought impossible to survive. That is a strength we cannot ignore." He turned to Ethan, extending a hand. "You have earned our respect." Ethan shook Cal's hand, feeling a mix of pride and relief. The journey had been long and difficult, but every late night, every failure, and every small success had led to this moment. As the crowd celebrated around him, Ethan glanced at Claire, who smiled through tears. They had done it together, proving that determination and teamwork could overcome even the toughest odds. In the days that followed, the Valens kept their promise. They offered to share some of their knowledge and technology with Earth, opening the door to a new era of cooperation. Scientists and engineers from both species began working side by side, exchanging ideas and learning from each other. Ethan and Claire were invited to join these efforts, their work on Asterisk, the Dawnbreaker Asterisk, earning them a place among the leaders of this collaboration. For Ethan, the experience was humbling. He had always dreamed of exploring the stars, but now he realized that the real adventure was in bringing people and species together. The Valens, once dismissive of humanity, began to see Earth as a partner rather than an inferior race. It was a shift that changed everything. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Ethan and Claire sat on a hill outside the city, watching the stars twinkle above them. "Do you think they'll ever fully trust us?" Claire asked, her voice thoughtful. Ethan shrugged. "It might take time," he replied, "but I think we've shown them that we're worth trusting. We don't have all the answers, but we're willing to try. That's something, isn't it?" Claire nodded, leaning back on her hands. "I never imagined we'd get this far when we started building that ship in that old warehouse. Look at us now." Ethan chuckled softly, gazing up at the sky. "Yeah, look at us. Who would have thought a couple of engineers from Ohio could change the way the universe sees us?" As the weeks passed, Asterisk, the Dawnbreaker Asterisk, became a symbol of hope and innovation. It was placed in a museum, its rough exterior telling the story of human perseverance. People from all over the world came to see it, inspired by what Ethan and Claire had achieved. Children stared in awe, dreaming of their own adventures among the stars. Scientists studied its design, eager to learn from its unique systems. But for Ethan, the greatest reward wasn't fame or recognition. It was knowing that he had made a difference, not just for himself, but for everyone. Humanity had taken its first steps toward being seen as equals in the galaxy, and Ethan knew this was only the beginning. Late one night, as he walked through the quiet streets of his hometown, Ethan felt a deep sense of gratitude. He thought about all the challenges they had faced, all the moments when giving up would have been easier. But they hadn't given up. They had pushed forward, driven by a belief in themselves and their potential. And now, looking up at the endless expanse of stars, Ethan couldn't help but smile. The universe was vast and full of mysteries, but for the first time, he felt like humanity was ready to face them, not alone, but alongside others. Together, anything seemed possible. The third and final trial was the most challenging of all. The Valens had chosen a dense nebula as the location, a swirling mass of colorful gas and unpredictable gravitational forces. It was a place where even their own ships struggled to navigate safely. Cale explained the rules with a confident smile. "This trial will test adaptability," he said. "Your ship must enter the nebula, survive its chaotic conditions, and emerge on the other side intact. Few vessels can withstand such an environment. Ethan listened carefully, his mind racing. He knew this would be the ultimate test for Asterisk, the Dawnbreaker Asterisk. The ship had performed well in the previous trials, but this was different. The nebula's gravitational anomalies could pull a ship off course or trap it forever. Its thick clouds of gas could block sensors and make navigation nearly impossible. Ethan glanced at Claire, who stood nearby, her face pale but determined. "We've come this far," she said softly. "Let's finish strong." Back at the workshop, they worked tirelessly to prepare the ship. Claire upgraded the sensor array, adding filters to cut through the nebula's interference. She also installed a new algorithm into the navigation system, one designed to predict changes in gravity and adjust the ship's path accordingly. Ethan focused on reinforcing the hull, knowing that the ship would need extra protection against the nebula's harsh conditions. Every modification was made with care, every detail double-checked. When the day of the trial arrived, Ethan climbed into the cockpit, his hand steady on the controls. The Valen ships hovered nearby, their pilots calm and composed. Ethan took a deep breath, reminding himself of everything they had accomplished so far. "You've got this," Claire's voice crackled over the radio. "Trust the ship, and trust yourself." The moment the trial began, chaos erupted. The ships entered the nebula, immediately surrounded by swirling clouds of gas and shifting gravitational fields. The Valens moved cautiously, their advanced technology struggling to adapt to the unpredictable environment. One ship veered too close to a gas pocket and was pulled off course, disappearing into the haze. Another became trapped in a gravitational loop, unable to break free. Ethan focused intently, guiding Asterisk, the Dawnbreaker Asterisk, through the chaos. The ship's sensors flickered as the gas clouds interfered with their readings, but Claire's upgrades kept them functional enough to provide basic data. The navigation system worked tirelessly, predicting shifts in gravity and adjusting the ship's trajectory in real time. Ethan's heart raced as he dodged pockets of dense gas and avoided invisible gravitational traps. It was like navigating a maze blindfolded, relying only on instinct and technology. At one point, the ship was caught in a sudden gravitational pull, yanking it toward a massive gas vortex. Ethan's hands flew across the controls, firing the engines at maximum power to escape. For a few terrifying seconds, it seemed like they wouldn't make it. But then, with a final burst of thrust, Asterisk, the Dawnbreaker Asterisk, broke free, soaring clear of the danger. Claire's voice came over the radio, tense but encouraging. "You're doing great, Ethan. Keep going." As the minutes turned into hours, the Valen ships continued to falter. Their sleek designs, which had seemed so perfect before, were no match for the nebula's relentless unpredictability. One by one, they either retreated or were lost to the chaos. Only Asterisk, the Dawnbreaker Asterisk, remained, pushing forward through the storm. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Ethan saw a faint glow ahead, the edge of the nebula. With a surge of determination, he guided the ship toward it, breaking free of the swirling clouds and emerging into open space. The moment they cleared the nebula, cheers erupted from the control room. Claire was jumping up and down, tears streaming down her face. "You did it," she shouted. "You actually did it." Ethan let out a long breath, his body trembling with exhaustion and relief. He had done it. Against all odds, Asterisk, the Dawnbreaker Asterisk, had survived the impossible. Cale approached him later, his usual smugness replaced by genuine respect. "I underestimated you," he admitted. "Your ship may lack our elegance, but it has something we do not: resilience." Ethan nodded, feeling a quiet pride. They hadn't just won a competition. They had proven that humanity's strength lay in its ability to adapt and overcome. As he looked out at the stars, Ethan realized that this was only the beginning of a new chapter, for him, for Claire, and for all of humanity. The second trial was set in a vast, open expanse of space far from Earth. This time, The challenge focused on endurance, a test of how long each ship could operate without running out of power or suffering critical failures. The Valens had chosen the location carefully, ensuring there would be no nearby stars or planets to provide additional energy sources. It was a harsh environment, designed to push every vessel to its limits. Ethan and Claire prepared the Dawnbreaker with care, knowing this trial would be different from the first. Speed and agility wouldn't matter as much here. What mattered was efficiency and resourcefulness. They spent hours going over the ship's systems, making sure the solar panels were clean and the magnetic field generator was calibrated perfectly. Claire also added a backup system to conserve energy during periods of low activity. "We can't afford to waste even a single watt," she told Ethan as they worked late into the night. When the day of the trial arrived, Ethan climbed into the cockpit once again, feeling a mix of determination and unease. The Valen ships floated nearby, their sleek designs gleaming under the dim light of distant stars. Ethan knew these vessels were built for long journeys, capable of traveling across galaxies without refueling. He couldn't help but wonder if the Dawnbreaker stood a chance against such advanced technology. As the trial began, all the ships activated their engines and started moving at a steady pace. There were no sudden maneuvers or sharp turns this time, just a slow, relentless push forward through empty space. Hours passed, then days. The Valens monitored the progress closely, their expressions unreadable behind their helmets. Ethan stayed focused, keeping an eye on the ship's energy levels and adjusting the controls whenever necessary. At first, everything seemed fine. The Dawnbreaker performed well, its systems running smoothly. But as time went on, Ethan noticed something worrying. The ship's power reserves were dropping faster than expected. He radioed Claire, who was watching from the control room. "Something's wrong," he said. "We're losing energy too quickly." Claire's voice came back calm but firm. "Check the solar panels. Maybe they're not absorbing enough light." Ethan did as she suggested, realizing that dust particles floating in space had settled on the panels, blocking some of the sunlight. He activated the cleaning mechanism, clearing away the debris. Slowly, the energy levels stabilized, giving him a small sense of relief. But he knew this was only a temporary fix. If they wanted to win, they needed to think smarter. That's when Claire suggested a bold idea. "Turn off non-essential systems," she said. "Divert all available power to the engine and life support. We don't need anything else right now." Ethan hesitated for a moment, then nodded. He powered down the navigation lights, reduced the cabin temperature slightly, and shut off auxiliary functions. The changes made a difference almost immediately. The ship's energy consumption dropped, allowing it to stay in the race longer. Meanwhile, the Valen ships began to show signs of strain. One by one, they started falling behind, their advanced systems unable to adapt to the extreme conditions. Ethan watched in amazement as the Dawnbreaker continued to hold its own, proving that sometimes simplicity and ingenuity could outlast complexity. By the end of the trial, only 2 ships remained: the Dawnbreaker and a single Valen vessel. When the final results were announced, Ethan's heart raced. To his surprise and delight, the judges declared the Dawnbreaker the winner. Its ability to conserve energy and adapt to challenges had given it the edge it needed. Cale approached Ethan afterward, his usual arrogance replaced by a hint of respect. "Your ship is unexpected," he admitted. "It lacks the elegance of our designs, yet it endures where others fail." Ethan smiled faintly. "Sometimes survival is more important than style," he replied. Back in the control room, Claire hugged him tightly, tears of joy streaming down her face. "You did it," she whispered. "You really did it." Ethan felt a surge of pride, not just for himself, but for humanity. They had proven that creativity and perseverance could overcome even the toughest obstacles. And as he looked out at the endless expanse of space, He realized that this was only the beginning. Finally, the day of the first trial arrived. The location was a remote area filled with asteroid fields, chosen by the Valens to test speed and agility. Several alien ships hovered nearby, sleek and polished, their designs far more advanced than anything Earth had ever produced. Ethan climbed into the cockpit of Asterisk, the Dawnbreaker Asterisk, feeling the mix of excitement and nerves. Claire stayed in the control room, monitoring the ship's systems and offering guidance over the radio. "Ready?" she asked, her voice crackling through the headset. "Ready," Ethan replied, gripping the controls tightly. He glanced at the Valen ships, their pilots watching silently. Then, with a deep breath, he pushed the throttle forward. The race began with a burst of speed, the ships darting between massive rocks and narrow gaps. The Valens moved gracefully, their vessels gliding effortlessly through the chaos. But Asterisk, the Dawnbreaker Asterisk, held its own, weaving through obstacles with surprising precision. Its adaptive navigation system allowed Ethan to react quickly to changes, giving him an edge over his competitors. As the trial progressed, the difficulty increased. Larger asteroids loomed ahead, forcing the ships to make split-second decisions. One by one, the Valen vessels began to fall behind, unable to match the agility of Ethan's creation. By the time they reached the finish line, Asterisk, the Dawnbreaker Asterisk, was in the lead. When Ethan landed, the crowd erupted into cheers. Even some of the Valens looked impressed, though they tried to hide it. Cale approached him, his usual smirk replaced by a thoughtful expression. "Not bad," he admitted grudgingly. "But there are still more trials to come." Ethan smiled, knowing the hardest part was yet to come. But for now, he allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. They had taken the first step, and it had been a good one. The success of the test flight sent shockwaves through the crowd. People cheered and clapped, their voices echoing across the launch site. Reporters scrambled to get interviews, thrusting microphones toward Ethan as he stepped out of Asterisk, the Dawnbreaker Asterisk. For once, he didn't feel nervous or unsure. Instead, he felt a quiet pride, not just in himself, but in what he and Claire had accomplished together. The ship wasn't perfect, but it had flown better than anyone could have expected, including the Valens. Cale, the Valen ambassador, stood at the edge of the crowd, his arms crossed and his expression unreadable. He had watched the entire demonstration in silence, his sharp eyes following every move of the ship. When Ethan finally approached him, Cale's lips curled into a faint smirk. "Impressive," he admitted, though his tone was still laced with skepticism. "For a human craft, that is." Ethan didn't rise to the bait. He simply nodded, keeping his emotions in check. "Thank you," he said politely. "But this is only the beginning. There's still more to show you." Cale raised an eyebrow, intrigued despite himself. "Oh, and what exactly do you plan to demonstrate next?" Instead of answering directly, Ethan glanced at Claire, who gave him an encouraging smile. "We're ready for whatever challenge you want to throw at us," he said confidently. "If you think your ships are better, then let's put them to the test." The alien ambassador studied Ethan for a moment, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he nodded. "Very well," Cale said. "We will organize a series of trials, a competition, if you will, to determine whose technology truly excels. But be warned, our vessels are unmatched. Are you prepared to face the consequences of failure?" Ethan met Cale's gaze without flinching. "I'm not afraid of challenges," he replied. "Let's do it." Word of the upcoming trials spread quickly, capturing the attention of people around the world. The idea of humans competing against the advanced Valens was both thrilling and terrifying. Some doubted Ethan's chances, believing the aliens were simply too far ahead. Others, however, saw the demonstration as proof that humanity could hold its own. Support poured in from all corners. Scientists offered advice, engineers volunteered their expertise, and ordinary citizens sent messages of encouragement. Back in the warehouse, Ethan and Claire worked tirelessly to prepare Asterisk the Dawnbreaker asterisk for the trials. They knew the competition would be fierce, and they couldn't afford to leave anything to chance. Every piece of the ship was inspected, every system tested multiple times. They added extra layers of shielding to protect against unknown dangers and upgraded the navigation software to handle even the most unpredictable environments. As the days passed, Ethan found himself reflecting on how far they'd come. Just months ago, he had been an unknown engineer mocked by aliens. Now he was standing toe-to-toe with one of the most advanced species in the galaxy. It wasn't about proving himself anymore. It was about showing the universe that humanity deserved respect. Claire shared his sense of purpose. "You know," she said one evening as they fine-tuned the engine, "this isn't just about winning. It's about changing the way they see us. If we can show them that we're capable of great things, maybe they'll stop looking down on us." Ethan nodded, tightening a bolt with his wrench. "That's exactly why we're doing this. We're not just building a ship. We're building a future where humans aren't underestimated." The weeks leading up to the demonstration were filled with long hours and constant challenges. Ethan and Claire worked around the clock, testing every part of Asterisk, the Dawnbreaker asterisk, to make sure it was ready for its big moment. They knew they couldn't afford any mistakes, not when the eyes of the world and the Valens would be on them. One of the biggest problems they faced was the engine. It had performed well during earlier tests, but as they pushed it harder, small issues began to appear. Sometimes the magnetic field generator would flicker, causing the ship to lose power for a few seconds. Other times, the solar panels wouldn't absorb energy efficiently, leaving the system underpowered. Each time something went wrong, Ethan felt a pang of frustration, but he forced himself to stay calm. "We can fix this," he told Claire repeatedly. "We just need to keep trying." Claire was equally determined. She spent hours poring over the wiring, tracing every connection to find weak points. Together, they made countless adjustments, tweaking the design until it became more stable. Slowly but surely, the engine started to perform better. It wasn't perfect, but it was close enough to give them hope. Another challenge was the ship's navigation system. Ethan wanted Asterisk, the Dawnbreaker asterisk, to handle complex maneuvers smoothly, even in unpredictable environments. To achieve this, he relied on a program Claire had written using advanced algorithms. The software allowed the ship to adapt quickly to changes in its surroundings, making it far more agile than traditional vessels. Testing the system was nerve-wracking. They ran simulations in the workshop, feeding fake data into the computer to mimic real-world conditions. Most of the time, the ship responded exactly as they hoped, but occasionally it faltered, forcing them to go back and refine the code. Despite these hurdles, Ethan refused to let doubt creep in. He reminded himself why he was doing this, not just to win a bet, but to show that humanity could rise to the occasion. Every late night, every failed test, and every small victory brought them closer to their goal. And as the days passed, Asterisk, the Dawnbreaker asterisk, grew stronger, more reliable, and more impressive. Finally, the day of the demonstration arrived. A large crowd gathered at the launch site, eager to see what Ethan had created. Reporters set up cameras, scientists took notes, and curious onlookers whispered excitedly among themselves. Even some Valen representatives showed up, their expressions unreadable but their presence undeniable. Ethan stood near the ship, his heart pounding as he watched people file in. Claire stayed by his side, offering quiet words of encouragement. "You've done everything you can," she said softly. "Now it's time to trust your work." Ethan nodded, though his nerves were still on edge. He climbed into the cockpit, running through a final checklist to ensure everything was in place. The controls felt unfamiliar under his hands, but he pushed the thought aside. This was his moment, and he wasn't going to waste it. As the engines roared to life, the crowd fell silent. Smoke billowed from the exhaust, and the ground trembled beneath the ship's weight. For a brief second, Ethan hesitated, wondering if something might go wrong. But then he remembered all the hard work, all the sacrifices, and all the nights spent in the workshop. He pushed the throttle forward, and the Dawnbreaker lifted off the ground. The ship soared into the sky, moving faster and smoother than anyone expected. Ethan guided it through a series of maneuvers, showing off its speed, agility, and precision. The crowd erupted into cheers as the ship performed loops, sharp turns, and sudden stops without missing a beat. Even the Valens looked surprised, their usual smug expressions replaced by looks of curiosity, and perhaps a hint of concern. When Ethan finally landed, the applause was deafening. People rushed toward the ship, patting him on the back and congratulating him on a job well done. Claire hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face. "You did it," she whispered. "You really did it." For the first time in months, Ethan allowed himself to relax. He didn't know what the Valens would say or how they would react, but he didn't care. He had proven that humans were capable of greatness, even when no one believed in them. And as he stood there, surrounded by cheering voices, he realized that the journey wasn't just about building a ship. It was about proving that humanity's potential was limitless, no matter who doubted them. The day of the second meeting with the Valens arrived, and Ethan felt a mix of excitement and nerves. He had spent months pouring his heart into the Dawnbreaker, and now it was time to face the aliens again. This time, though, he wasn't going to stay quiet. He had something to say, and something to prove. The meeting took place in a large auditorium filled with people, scientists, reporters, government officials, and even curious locals gathered to watch the exchange between Earth's representatives and the Valens. The aliens stood tall and confident at the front of the room, their sleek silver suits gleaming under the bright lights. Kale, the Valen ambassador, looked as smug as ever, his sharp eyes scanning the crowd. Ethan stood off to the side, clutching a folder of updated blueprints. Claire stayed close by, offering quiet words of encouragement. When it was Ethan's turn to speak, he stepped forward, his hands trembling slightly but his voice steady. "I've been working on a new project," he began, glancing briefly at Kel. "A ship that I believe can match, or even surpass, the capabilities of your vessels." A murmur rippled through the audience. Some people seemed intrigued, while others exchanged skeptical looks. The Valens, however, reacted with barely concealed amusement. Kale raised an eyebrow, his lips curling into a smirk. "Oh, and what makes you think your creation can compete with our technology?" he asked, his tone dripping with mockery. "Last time we saw your designs, they were, shall we say, rudimentary." Ethan took a deep breath, refusing to let Cal's words shake him. "You won't know until you see it for yourself," he replied calmly. "Give me 6 months. If my ship performs better than yours, you'll acknowledge that humanity has potential. But if it fails—" He paused, locking eyes with Kale. "Then I'll admit that we still have a lot to learn." A tense silence fell over the room. The stakes were high, and everyone knew it. Kale studied Ethan for a moment, clearly surprised by the boldness of his proposal. Finally, the alien ambassador chuckled. "Very well," he said, extending his hand. "We accept your challenge. But don't be disappointed when your little experiment falls short." Ethan shook Cal's hand, feeling a surge of determination. He didn't care about the condescension in Cal's voice or the doubtful glances from the crowd. All that mattered was proving that humans could rise to the occasion, no matter how impossible things seemed. After the meeting, Ethan returned to the warehouse with Claire, who was equal parts excited and nervous. "Do you really think we can pull this off?" she asked as they unpacked tools and supplies. "I mean, 6 months isn't a lot of time." "We don't have a choice," Ethan said firmly. "This isn't just about winning a bet. It's about showing them, and ourselves, that we're not as weak as they think. We've already come so far with the Dawnbreaker. Now we just need to make sure it's ready." The next few weeks were a blur of activity. Ethan and Claire worked tirelessly, fine-tuning every detail of the ship. They tested the engine repeatedly, making adjustments to ensure it could handle long journeys. They reinforced the hull to withstand extreme conditions and installed sensors to help navigate unfamiliar environments. Every improvement brought them closer to their goal, but it also reminded them of how much was riding on their success. One evening, as they sat together in the dimly lit workshop, Claire broke the silence. "You know, Ethan, I never thought I'd say this, but I'm actually starting to believe we might win." Ethan smiled faintly, his gaze fixed on the ship towering above them. "We have to believe it, Claire. If we don't, then who will?" As the deadline approached, Ethan began preparing for the demonstration. He knew the Valens would be watching closely, ready to point out any flaw. But he also knew that Asterisk, the Dawnbreaker Asterisk, was more than just a machine. It represented hope, resilience, and the unyielding spirit of humanity. Whether it succeeded or failed, it would send a message. Humans weren't afraid to dream big, even when the universe laughed at them. And deep down, Ethan hoped that message would be enough to change the way the Valens saw them. Ethan and Claire worked day and night in the old warehouse, their hands covered in grease and their minds racing with ideas. The space was cluttered with tools, wires, and half-finished parts. In the center of it all stood the skeleton of the ship, slowly coming to life under their care. Ethan called it Asterisk, the Dawnbreaker Asterisk, a name that carried both hope and defiance. It wasn't just a machine to him. It was a chance to prove that humans could achieve greatness, even when the odds were stacked against them. Every step of the process was a challenge. The materials they needed were either too expensive or impossible to find, so they had to improvise. Old car engines, satellite parts, and scrap metal became the building blocks of their creation. Claire often joked that they were making a spaceship out of junk, but Ethan didn't see it that way. To him, every piece had potential if you knew how to use it. He spent hours sketching designs, running calculations, and testing theories. Sometimes he would lose track of time entirely, only realizing how late it was when Claire reminded him to take a break. One evening, as they sat on overturned crates eating sandwiches, Claire asked the question that had been on her mind for weeks. "Do you really think this is going to work, Ethan? I mean, these aliens are light years ahead of us. What if we can't catch up?" Her voice wasn't sharp or critical. It was soft, filled with concern. She believed in Ethan, but she also understood how big the gap was between human technology and the Valens. Ethan looked at her, his expression calm but firm. "I don't know if it'll work," he admitted, "but I do know one thing. We won't get anywhere by giving up before we even try. If we fail, fine. At least we'll have tried. But if we succeed—" He paused, his eyes lighting up with determination. "If we succeed, we'll show them, and ourselves, what we're truly capable of." Claire nodded, though doubt still lingered in her mind. She admired Ethan's confidence, but she couldn't shake the feeling that they were aiming for something far beyond their reach. Still, she stayed by his side, helping wherever she could. Together, they tackled each problem as it came, learning from their mistakes and improving with every attempt. The hardest part of the project was the engine. Ethan's design relied on a new kind of propulsion system, one that combined solar energy with magnetic fields to create thrust. It was an ambitious idea, and getting it to work proved nearly impossible. There were days when the engine sputtered and died, sending sparks flying across the workshop. Other times, it overheated, forcing them to shut everything down and start over. Each failure was frustrating, but Ethan refused to let it discourage him. Instead, he saw every setback as a lesson, a step closer to success. As the weeks turned into months, the ship began to take shape. The frame grew stronger, the wiring more precise, and the engine less prone to breakdowns. Claire noticed a change in Ethan during this time. He seemed calmer, more focused. The stress of the Valens' mockery no longer weighed on him as heavily. Instead, he channeled that energy into his work, pouring every ounce of his being into Asterisk, the Dawnbreaker Asterisk. It was as if the ship had become an extension of himself, a reflection of his dreams and struggles. One night, after a particularly long day of testing, Claire leaned against the wall of the workshop and sighed. "You know, Ethan, if someone had told me a year ago that I'd be helping build a spaceship in a dusty old warehouse, I would have laughed in their face." She smiled faintly, shaking her head. "But here we are." Ethan grinned, wiping his hands on a rag. "And we're not done yet. This is just the beginning." His voice was steady, full of conviction. For the first time since the project started, Claire felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could pull this off. By the time the final pieces were in place, the Dawnbreaker looked nothing like the sleek, polished ships of the Valens. Its surface was rough, patched together with mismatched materials. But beneath its imperfect exterior lay something extraordinary, a machine built not just with science, but with heart. Ethan stepped back to admire their work, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. They had come so far, and now it was time to see if their efforts would pay off. The next phase would be the hardest, testing the ship in real conditions. Ethan knew there was no guarantee of success, but he also knew one thing for certain. They had already proven something important. No matter what happened, they had shown that humanity's strength didn't lie in perfection. It lay in persistence, in the refusal to give up, even when the world doubted them. And that, Ethan thought, was worth more than any alien approval. Ethan Carter lived a quiet life in a small town in Ohio. He was not famous, nor did he try to be. People knew him as the man who fixed broken machines and built strange gadgets in his garage. Ethan loved engineering. From a young age, he spent hours taking apart old radios, bicycles, and anything else he could get his hands on. He wanted to understand how things worked, and more importantly, how they could work better. His friends often teased him about his obsession, but Ethan didn't mind. To him, there was nothing more exciting than solving a problem or creating something new. One day, everything changed. Earth made its first contact with an alien species called the Valens. These aliens were tall, sleek, and highly advanced. Their ships glided through the skies effortlessly, and their technology seemed like magic compared to what humans had. The Valens came in peace, but their attitude toward humanity was clear. They thought humans were primitive. During a public meeting between Earth's leaders and the Valens, Ethan was asked to present some of his designs. It was meant to show that humans were capable of innovation too. Ethan stood nervously in front of the crowd, holding a stack of blueprints. He explained his ideas for a new kind of spacecraft, one that could travel faster and farther than any human-made ship before. But instead of being impressed, the Valens laughed. Cale, the Valen ambassador, smirked as he flipped through Ethan's drawings. "This is your best effort," Cale said, his voice filled with mockery. "These are charming attempts, but they are far behind what we have achieved." The room fell silent. Ethan felt his face grow hot with embarrassment. He wanted to argue, to explain that his designs were just the beginning, but the words stuck in his throat. The Valens moved on to other topics, leaving Ethan standing there, feeling small and insignificant. That night, Ethan sat alone in his garage, staring at the blueprints spread across his workbench. He replayed the scene in his mind over and over again. The laughter, the smirks, the way Cale dismissed his work so casually, it burned inside him. But Ethan wasn't the type to give up easily. In fact, the mockery only fueled his determination. He decided then and there that he would prove the Valens wrong. He wouldn't just build a ship, he would build the greatest ship anyone had ever seen. Ethan knew it wouldn't be easy. He didn't have access to fancy labs or unlimited resources. All he had were his tools, his knowledge, and his stubborn refusal to quit. The next morning, Ethan called his childhood friend, Claire Bennett. Claire was also an engineer, though she worked in a factory repairing machinery. When Ethan told her about his plan, she was skeptical at first. "You want to build a spaceship that can compete with the Valens. Are you serious?" she asked. But when she saw the fire in Ethan's eyes, she couldn't say no. Together, they began working on the project in secret. They turned an old, abandoned warehouse into their workshop, filling it with scraps of metal, wires, and whatever else they could find. For weeks, Ethan and Claire worked tirelessly. They tested new ideas, failed countless times, and started over again. Slowly, piece by piece, the ship began to take shape. It wasn't pretty, far from it, but it was unique. Ethan's design was based on a theory he had been developing for years. Instead of relying on traditional fuel, the ship would use a combination of energy sources, including solar power and a special kind of magnetic field generator. If it worked, the ship would be able to move faster and farther than anything currently in existence. As the days passed, Ethan grew more confident. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, but he also knew that he had something the Valens didn't, a relentless drive to succeed. And deep down, he believed that this drive might just be enough to change the way the universe saw humanity.